I never thought my life would shrink to a moment as small and humiliating as standing in front of my own refrigerator, staring at a single half-rotten apple, and wondering whether I should eat it or let hunger gnaw at me a little longer. That morning, I felt the walls of the house I helped build closing in on me, pressing against my chest as if they wanted to swallow my voice. I took the apple in my hands, examined the soft brown patch on its skin, and wondered when I had stopped being someone worth feeding. It was in that quiet moment of shame that I heard footsteps behind me, light, confident, almost rehearsed. Misha leaned against the doorway with her arms crossed and her phone in her hand, not even pretending to care. And when I asked, as gently as I could, if she could buy a few groceries using the pension money I trusted her with, she didn't even bother to meet my eyes. She just smirked and said, "Your pension is not your responsibility anymore. It's ours. Don't complicate things." The way she said ours sliced through me like a cold blade. I stood there holding that apple, feeling older than my age, feeling invisible in a house where I once moved with pride. I wanted to believe she didn't mean it the way it sounded, but her voice had that calculated sharpness I had started recognizing too often. Something in me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but like a quiet fracture spreading through the foundation of a home. Hunger hurts, yes, but disrespect from someone you welcomed into your family, that pain burns deeper. And in that moment, I didn't yet understand the full cruelty behind her words. I didn't know she had already drained my $10,000 annual pension in small, quiet thefts while telling me we were tight on money. I didn't know she used my ATM card more than I ever had. I didn't know she had been living a lifestyle that didn't match her husband's salary, but matched mine. I only felt a strange heaviness settling in my chest, as if some unseen truth was trying to warn me, pushing me to pay attention. When she walked away, flipping her hair and whispering something under her breath, I felt smaller than ever. But the real blow landed a few minutes later, when I heard her voice again, this time low, hushed, dripping with intent. And when I realized she wasn't alone, I froze in place. She was whispering to my son, my boy, who once held my hand crossing the street, who used to cry if I wasn't home when he got back from school. I heard him ask quietly, "Why is she asking again? Didn't you tell her we're handling it?" And Misha's voice, sharp and venomous, cut through the hall. "If she keeps complaining, we'll just put her in a home. Let someone else deal with her." I felt my breath stop. Maybe it was fear, maybe disbelief, maybe that deep, primal shock a mother feels when her own child becomes a stranger. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself, my heart trembling like something too fragile to hold. For a moment, the world felt tilted, like I had stepped onto a floor that no longer held my weight. I wanted to burst into the room and confront them, demand answers, scream at them for even imagining something so cruel, but fear kept me still. A fear I never thought I'd associate with my own child. I felt as if my existence had been reduced to an inconvenience they were planning to remove. And the terrifying part wasn't just what she said, it was the silence that followed. My son didn't argue, didn't defend me, didn't say a single word to stop her. That silence felt louder than anything Misha said. It was the kind of silence that erases years of sacrifices in a single moment. I slowly walked back toward the living room, pretending I hadn't heard anything. But my body gave me away. My hands shook. My breath came shallow. My vision felt blurry, and shame spread through me like poison. I sank onto the sofa, holding that same apple in my lap, feeling its weight far heavier than it should have been. I wondered how I had ended up here, how a woman who once ran a whole household, who worked 2 jobs to raise her children, had become someone begging for basic dignity. And I wondered, did other mothers feel this kind of quiet betrayal too? This kind of ache that settles deep enough to bruise the soul? Before I could gather myself, before I could wipe the tears that had started spilling despite my efforts to stop them, the doorbell rang. The sound startled me so much I nearly dropped the apple. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one visits me anymore except out of obligation. Misha called out carelessly, "Can you get that? I'm busy." As if I were some housemaid she forgot to pay. I forced myself up, smoothing my clothes even though my heart was pounding, and opened the door. There stood my daughter, Nora, unexpectedly early, wrapped in a soft blue shawl, her eyes instantly scanning my face with concern. She didn't smile. She didn't greet me the way she usually did. Something in her expression tightened, like she walked into a room filled with smoke before she saw the fire. "Amy, are you okay?" she whispered. Her voice cracked in a way that told me she already knew the answer. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to protect her from the ugliness I had been enduring, but the truth sat too heavily on my tongue. She stepped inside and looked around, her gaze moving like someone searching for a clue. I saw her eyes fall on the fridge door, still slightly open, with that lonely apple sitting exposed on the shelf. Her jaw tightened. "Is this all you've eaten today?" she asked, her voice low but trembling. I tried to laugh it off, mumbling something about not being hungry, but she didn't believe me not for a second. There are things daughters know even before their mothers speak, and Noor had always been the one who sensed my pain before I voiced it. She took my hands and felt how cold they were. She looked at my face as if counting the new wrinkles, the new tiredness etched into my skin. "Amy," she said softly, "something is wrong here." She wasn't asking a question, she was stating a fact. And despite the fear clawing at my heart, a small part of me felt seen for the first time in months. But before I could speak, before I could reveal even a fraction of what I had endured, I heard footsteps behind us. Misha appeared from the hallway, her voice suddenly sweetened like artificial honey. "Oh, Noor, we didn't know you were coming. You should have told us." Noor didn't respond. She didn't even look at her. Her eyes remained locked on mine, waiting for me to speak, waiting for the truth. I had been too ashamed to tell anyone. I felt like I was standing on a tightrope between fear and confession, between silence and survival, and deep down, I sensed that everything was about to change. Because Noor hadn't seen the documents, not yet. I never thought my life would come to a moment where my own daughter would ask, with trembling disbelief, "Ami, how long has this been happening?" And I wouldn't be able to look her in the eyes. Shame is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive loudly. It grows quietly in the corners of your life, like dampness creeping through a wall, spreading silently until one day the entire structure feels weak. And as I sat across from Noor that evening, the dull light of the living room lamp casting long shadows across the floor, I felt every bit of that weakness. I felt the years I had spent hiding the truth, tugging at me like a weight around my chest. She kept waiting for my answer, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat, drumming with memories I had buried, deep memories of the day everything changed. My husband wasn't perfect. No man is, but he was good. Good in the way men used to be. Steady, hardworking, proud of the smallest things he could give his family. I still remember the smell of engine oil on his clothes each evening when he walked into the house. His tired smile warm enough to melt any worry I had carried that day. When he fell sick, it felt sudden, almost unfair, like life had turned the page before I had finished reading the last line. I became a widow before I was ready to face the world alone. And yet, I didn't cry in front of the children, not once. I told myself I would carry all the tears inside me, because they deserved a mother who stood firm. They deserved a childhood untouched by grief. But life tests widows in ways the world never sees. I stitched clothes until my fingers numbed, worked double shifts at the school canteen, and sold homemade pickles to neighbors just to keep the lights on. At night, when the children slept, I would sit on the floor and go through every rupee I had earned, counting, saving, planning. My pension became my lifeline, my tiny island of safety in a storm that lasted years. And as they grew older, I took pride in the fact that they never felt poor. My daughters had school uniforms that were always clean and neat. My son had the school books he needed. I denied myself everything so they would never feel the absence of their father. But what happened next left me speechless, because sacrifice is a strange creature. You feed it your youth, your sleep, your health, and, sometimes unknowingly, you feed it your dignity too. I didn't realize it back then, but someone else had been watching everything I did. Someone who saw not my strength, but my exhaustion. Someone who saw an opportunity. Misha's voice still echoes in my mind, soft, sweet, dripping with concern, the way honey coats a spoon. "Amy, you manage everything alone. Let me help." She said it while brushing my hair that day, as if the gesture itself was proof of her affection. I remember smiling at her, feeling grateful that at least one of my children understood the burden I carried. I didn't know then that this was the first thread being pulled from the fabric of my independence. She offered to handle my finances just for a while, she said, because my health was slipping and I had fainted twice that winter. It felt harmless at the time, almost loving. I convinced myself that letting her help was a blessing, but help can turn into control faster than a mother can catch her breath. The changes were tiny at first, so tiny that I almost blamed myself for noticing. Misha insisted I rest more, and stopped me from going to the tailor shop where I did odd jobs. "People will take advantage of you," she said, and I believed her. She began picking up my pension envelope from the post office, saying it was too far for me to walk. I let her. Mothers trust. Mothers forgive. Mothers don't imagine betrayal not from their own blood. But the day she placed my purse in a locked drawer and kept the key, so I wouldn't misplace it, that was the day something cold settled inside me. I ignored it. I told myself it was temporary, that it was for my own good. Isn't that the lie so many mothers swallow simply to keep the peace? And then things grew darker in ways I never expected. If you've ever had to ask permission for something that already belongs to you, you'll understand the humiliation I lived with. Sometimes I would want to buy vegetables for a recipe, and Misha would say with a shrug, "Not today, Amy, we're budgeting." Other times I would ask for a little extra money to send sweets to a neighbor's newborn baby, and she would sigh, "You spend too freely. You have to stop being careless." Careless, that word stuck to my skin like dirt. I, who had stretched every rupee for decades, was suddenly being treated like a child who couldn't be trusted. But I stayed silent, because shame steals your voice long before anyone else tries to silence you. And then one morning, Nora came home. Her visits had become less frequent because of work, but that weekend she walked in cheerfully with Mithai in her hand and said she wanted to spend the day with me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny spark of myself returning. We cooked together, talked about her job, and I laughed in a way I hadn't laughed in months. I didn't realize how much I had missed that warmth until it came back. But what happened next made my stomach twist. While clearing the dining table after lunch, Nora picked up a folded slip of paper tucked beneath a coaster. She thought it was trash. She opened it casually, but the moment her eyes scanned the numbers, her face changed. She looked at me sharply and said, "Amy, what is this?" I didn't understand at first. She handed me the paper, and there it was, a salon receipt. Not for a simple haircut or manicure. It was for an amount I had never spent in my entire life on personal care. An amount withdrawn from my pension account. My knees felt weak. I sat down without meaning to. Nora's voice grew quieter, angrier. "Did you go to this place? Did you spend this?" I shook my head. I couldn't form words, not because I didn't know what to say, but because the truth was too painful to admit. That my money, my safety, my independence had been used without my knowledge. Nora's eyes widened with something between disbelief and fury. She knelt in front of me, her hands on my knees, her voice trembling. "Amy, why didn't you tell me something was wrong?" But I didn't answer. I couldn't. How do you explain that your own child made you feel small? How do you confess that you allowed it to happen because you wanted to believe they cared? And before I could gather myself, my phone buzzed. The sharp vibration cut through the room like a knife. I reached for it, but Nora grabbed it faster, thinking it was another offer from Misha or a message about errands. But when she looked at the screen, all the color drained from her face. It was a bank withdrawal alert, a large one, and I hadn't authorized a single rupee. Before she could speak, I felt the world tilt around me, and that receipt was only the beginning. I knew something was terribly wrong the moment. Nora sat down beside me with that salon receipt still trembling in her hand. She kept staring at the glossy paper, the printed amount almost mocking us. When she finally looked at me, her voice was low, controlled, but shaking with a quiet rage I had never seen in her before. "Amy, this isn't a mistake." And hearing her say it out loud made something inside me collapse. Because now there was no pretending, no excuses, no giving Misha the benefit of the doubt. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't miscommunication. This was theft, calculated, repeated theft, and I had let it happen right under my roof. But before I could even breathe properly, Nora stood up, her jaw tight. "We're going to get answers." I wanted to tell her no, to stop, to slow down, but I had been silent for too long, and silence had cost me my dignity. Maybe this time, letting my daughter lead was the only way anything would change. She began with the drawer nearest to her, opening it as quietly as she could, like she was diffusing a bomb. Papers rustled, envelopes shuffled, stray pens clinked, and with every item she touched, I felt my heartbeat echo in my ears. What if this drawer held something worse? What if everything I feared was only the beginning? Nora kept going, her movements methodical, intense. She was no longer just my daughter. She was an investigator, peeling back layers of lies I hadn't even known were wrapped around me. But what happened next left me stunned. She found another receipt, this time for an expensive handbag from a boutique I couldn't even pronounce. Paid with my pension card. My throat tightened so hard I almost couldn't speak. "Noor, how many more do you think there are?" She didn't look up. As many as she thought she could get away with. Amy. Hearing that broke me in a way hunger never had, because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about trust. My own son and his wife had taken advantage of my vulnerability, my kindness, my fear of being a burden. They had used my love as a weapon against me, and yet I still felt ashamed. Isn't that strange? When people wrong you deeply and repeatedly, you still somehow feel embarrassed, as though you invited the hurt. But Noor wasn't ashamed. She was angry, furious, and seeing her anger gave me permission to finally feel my own. We moved to the next drawer. That one was filled with old bank statements, some still sealed. Noor pulled them out, stacking them on the table. "We'll go through every single one," she said. "I don't care if it takes all day." I nodded, but my stomach twisted. I was terrified of what we might find. Terrified, but also desperate. I needed answers. I needed the truth, even if the truth shattered everything. As Noor slit open the first envelope, I braced myself. A moment later, she inhaled sharply. Spa appointment charges, 5 in a single month. I felt my body go cold. Spa appointments, while I was rationing chapati pieces and making tea bags last 2 uses. What kind of woman does that to someone who gave her a home? But what happened next made my skin crawl. Noor found a statement showing a dinner charge at a luxury restaurant. Not one dinner. My son had taken her out, celebrating God knows what, using the pension that was supposed to keep food in my belly. My hand pressed against the table to keep myself steady. How could I have lived with people capable of this cruelty without ever noticing the rot beneath their smiles? Noor didn't stop. She kept flipping, scanning, circling, highlighting patterns with a pen she found lying nearby. "Amy, this isn't occasional. This is a lifestyle." She was right. Each page was another punch to the chest, another reminder of how blind I had been. But then the house fell silent. Too silent. I hadn't realized how loud our breathing had been until the sound of keys jingling at the front door snapped us back to reality. Noor's head jerked up. My pulse skyrocketed. They were home early. Much earlier than usual. Noor immediately grabbed the nearest stack of papers and hid them behind her back. I shoved the receipts under a cushion, my fingers trembling. The door opened. Misha's high-pitched voice floated in first, irritated about something trivial. Then my son's deeper voice, annoyed, exhausted. Noor locked eyes with me. "Don't say anything," she mouthed. They walked into the living room. Misha gave me a strange look, half annoyance, half suspicion. "Why are you sitting here in the dark?" she asked, her tone sweet in the way that made my skin crawl. Noor answered for me. "We were just talking." Misha gave a thin smile. Too thin, too practiced. My son barely glanced at me before heading to his room. Noor kept her posture calm, but I could feel her tension radiating like heat. If they came even an inch closer to the table, they would see everything, every receipt, every statement, every proof of their betrayal. But somehow, whether by fate or sheer luck, they didn't. Misha walked straight to the kitchen to complain about the temperature of the water dispenser. My son followed her. Noor exhaled quietly. "We'll continue later," she whispered. I nodded, but my heart was still pounding. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop spinning. Every lie, every moment of manipulation replayed in my head. So I decided to get a glass of water to calm myself. As I passed by their room, I heard voices, not just voices in argument. A heated one. My son sounded frustrated. "Why did you take so much? I told you to slow down." Misha hissed something back, her voice sharp as a blade. "Don't start that. You agreed. You said as long as she doesn't interfere, we're fine." Then her voice dropped lower, but I still heard the words that made my knees almost buckle. "If she finds out about the form, we're done." The form. I froze. What form? I stepped back as quietly as I could. My breaths shallow. My mind raced. Had they signed something, taken something, stolen something more than money? But what happened next left me trembling. My son replied, "The bank said once it's processed, she can't reverse it anyway. Relax." Relax. Misha's answer was chilling. Relax. If Noor sees it, she'd drag us to court. My hand flew to my mouth. They were scared of Noor. Why? What had they done that Noor, my gentle, empathetic girl, could expose? I didn't sleep at all after that. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to my heartbeat pounding like a warning drum. By morning, the fear had settled into something else, determination. And Noor, sharp as ever, noticed my face the moment she walked into my room. "What happened?" she whispered. So I told her. Every word, every whispered threat I overheard. Her expression hardened like stone. "We're going to find that form." We started after breakfast, pretending everything was normal, while Misha and my son left for work. The moment the door clicked shut, Noor turned to me. "Show me their room." And for the first time in months, I led the way with purpose. Their room felt suffocating. Noor scanned the shelves, the table, the drawers. She opened each one with precision, checking documents, bills, random folders. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then she reached the desk drawer on the right side, the one they rarely used. It was locked. Noor looked at me. "Ami, do you know where the key is?" I shook my head. "But your brother used to keep all keys in the top wardrobe drawer when he lived alone." She immediately went there, rummaging carefully until she found a small ring of keys. One of them clicked perfectly. When she opened the drawer, a stack of neatly arranged documents stared back at us like taunting ghosts of betrayal. Noor picked up the first document. Her eyes widened. The bold heading made my heartbeat spike instantly. Power of attorney, full financial control. The room spun around me. Noor's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. "Ami, this gives them complete access to everything. Bank accounts, pension, investments, everything." I felt like collapsing. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep myself standing. "I never signed this," I whispered. Noor turned the page. "You didn't." She held up the signature. "My signature. Except it wasn't. It was never mine." "This is forged," Noor said, her voice breaking. "They forged your signature, Ami." I don't remember the moment my legs gave out, but I found myself sitting on the edge of the bed, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Betrayal was no longer an idea, was ink on paper, stamped, authorized, used against me in silence. They had legally erased my control over my own life. And worst of all, they had done it when I was sequin. I trusted them blindly. But Noor wasn't done. She kept digging through the drawer, her anger fueling her movements. She found passports, old bills, loan applications. Then she found an envelope sealed tightly, with my son's handwriting on it. Noor's expression stiffened. "This one looks new." She tore it open. Inside was something that made her freeze completely. A long pause followed. "Too long." "Noor, what is it?" I whispered. She didn't speak at first. She just handed me the first page. When I read the heading, my entire body turned to ice. A loan application in my name with my pension as collateral. A loan I had never taken, never requested, never even heard about. And the amount, it was huge. If approved, it would leave me penniless for years. Noor's voice came out tight. They were planning to take a loan using your identity. Ami, this is criminal." My hands trembled violently. My children, my own children, had dragged my name into fraud. How could they? Why would they? What did I do to deserve this? I had given them everything. My youth, my strength, my money, my health. And this was my repayment. But Noor wasn't finished. "There's more," she whispered. She reached back into the drawer, pulling out another sealed envelope. A bank logo sat on the corner. This one was heavier, filled with multiple sheets. I felt nausea creeping in, but Noor slowly tore it open. Page after page spilled out onto the bed. Wire transfers, multiple ones, large amounts, all sent to an unfamiliar account. "Who's this?" Noor murmured. My eyes caught the name. I knew it instantly. "Misha's sister." My pulse spiked. "She lives abroad." Noor nodded. "Yes, and this money was sent regularly." But what happened next made even Noor go pale. She found a separate slip hidden between pages. A booking confirmation for a luxury romantic getaway Dubai. 2 tickets, for my son and Misha, fully paid with my pension. My breath hitched so painfully I had to clutch my chest. While I starved, while I lived with shame, while I rationed my medicines, they were planning international vacations with my money. Money meant for my survival, my dignity, my old age. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. Why? Why would they do this to me? Noor hugged me, her voice trembling with fury and grief. "Because they thought you wouldn't fight back. Because they assumed you were too sick, too dependent, too afraid of confrontation. But they made a mistake, Ami. They underestimated you." She wiped her tears and stood again. "I'm checking the rest." There was one drawer left, the smallest one, tucked at the bottom. It had no handle, almost invisible. Noor noticed it only because a corner of an envelope was sticking out. She pried it open. Inside were more receipts, more statements, more proof. But also something else. One last envelope. Thick, heavy, unmarked. Noor opened it cautiously, and inside, what she found made her visibly recoil. Documents from a lawyer. Documents detailing a plan to transfer my house to their name, without telling me, without my consent, with the forged power of attorney giving them the right. My world stopped. This wasn't mismanagement. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't even simple theft. This was a plan to erase me, legally, financially, and eventually, physically. Because once they took the house, once I became too difficult, once I questioned too much. What then? A nursing home. A cheap one. A forgotten one. Where old women rot without visitors. My breath shuddered. Noor held my hand tightly, her voice rising with fury. We're taking every one of these documents, Amy. Every proof. Every receipt. Every signature. We're putting it all in a file. And then we're going to make them answer for this. But before we could collect everything, before we could even breathe properly, Noor found one last envelope, thin, yellowed, with a stamp I didn't recognize. Inside that next envelope was a secret that could send someone to prison. I remember the moment Noor turned to me with that steel in her eyes I had never seen before. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her voice was sharp, unwavering. Amy, we can't wait anymore. We need to go to a lawyer. All of this, it's criminal. I felt a cold wave of fear sweep over me. Going to a lawyer meant facing my own blood with evidence in our hands. It meant admitting that my son and his wife had betrayed me in ways I could hardly comprehend. My chest tightened, my stomach turned. And yet, as I looked at Noor, I realized something profound. She wasn't scared, she was furious. And for the first time, that fury gave me courage. We arranged to see a lawyer the very next morning. The office smelled faintly of leather and ink, a quiet reminder of how official and irrevocable truth can feel. Noor handed over the documents, the receipts, the bank statements, every shred of proof we had gathered in the last week. The lawyer's eyes flicked over the pages, and with every line, I felt as if my bones were turning to ice. Finally, he leaned back, his expression grave. This is forgery. There's no question. Your signature has been copied. Your money has been used illegally, and this second document, he said, tapping the pre-application for the elder care facility, is far worse. This shows intent to remove you from your home without your knowledge. Legally, your son acted as your proxybet. This is fraud. I closed my eyes and felt a wave of betrayal crash over me. How could I have nurtured, loved, and trusted them? And this was how they repaid me. Noor squeezed my hand. Amy, we have what we need. Now, we confront them. My heart pounded. Confrontation had always terrified me. I had spent decades avoiding conflict, smoothing tensions, keeping the peace. But now, avoiding them would mean allowing this theft to continue. It would mean silence was complicity. Noor had a plan. Dinner that evening would be our stage. Hidden among the dishes and utensils would be the proof of their crimes, and her phone would record every word. I felt the tension knotting in my chest. What if they denied everything? What if they turned the tables? But I trusted Noor. If anyone could expose this manipulation, it was her. That night, we prepared dinner as normal. Noor moved with calm precision, her movements deliberate, almost serene. She placed the plates, poured the water, and ensured everything looked ordinary. Meanwhile, her phone rested near the edge of the table, recording. I kept my hands folded, my mind racing with fear and anticipation. When Misha and my son walked in, their smiles were polished, practiced. I could feel Misha's eyes scanning me, probably gauging my mood, testing my reactions. She had no idea what was coming. And yet, my pulse thumped in my ears like a warning drum. We began eating. Conversation was casual at first, superficial remarks about the weather, the neighbors, work, but Noor's eyes never left them. Then, ever so subtly, she slid the first document across the table toward Misha, letting it catch the lamplight. Do you recognize this? She asked calmly. Misha's eyes flicked down, and her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. That fraction was all Noor needed. She slid the rest of the papers forward, bank statements, receipts, the forged power of attorney. My stomach lurched. Silence descended like a heavy curtain. Misha's mask cracked almost immediately. She laughed nervously at first, but it was sharp, bitter, ungrateful, she said, voice rising slightly. You're too old to understand finances. I was managing your money better than you ever could. My son remained quiet, his face pale, guilt etched into every line. I wanted to cry, to scream, to tell them I had fed them, clothed them, trusted them with my life, and this was the thanks I received. But Noor's voice cut through the room like a sword. This isn't about your convenience, Misha. This is theft. This is manipulation. And yes, we have proof. What happened next is a blur of voices, accusations, and anger. Misha tried to interrupt, her tone sharp, defensive. You think you know everything, but you don't. You're imagining things. Noor raised her phone slightly, letting Misha see the blinking red recording icon. You've already admitted enough, she said coldly. My son finally spoke, voice shaking. I, but he couldn't finish. Shame and guilt tied his tongue in knots. The argument escalated, voices rising, tension spilling beyond the walls of the dining room. Something primal stirred in me, years of suppression, quiet suffering, betrayal. It all surged forward. I found myself shouting, a sound I didn't even recognize. You have no right, none. This is my home, my money, my life. Neighbors began appearing at their doors, drawn by the yelling. I could hear murmurs in the hallway, footsteps pacing. Someone called the police. The sirens seemed to echo the storm inside me. Misha's face transformed from smug confidence to something raw and terrified. She knew the walls around her lies were crumbling. My son sat, frozen, caught between defending his wife and facing the truth of his mother's rage. And for the first time in decades, I realized fear was no longer mine alone. Now it was theirs. They were exposed, powerless, trapped by the very deception they had counted on. When the police arrived, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The officers asked to see the documents. I handed them over. Every paper, every receipt, every forged signature. Misha's protests were sharp but hollow. My son's silence spoke louder than any words. They had built walls around their crimes, confident in secrecy, but secrecy had no power when faced with evidence, and that power shift exhilarated me. Noor stood beside me, calm, collected, a quiet pillar of strength. I realized something then. Revenge isn't about anger, it's about reclaiming what's yours. Justice isn't about hate, it's about truth. The officers took statements, photographs, and copies of the documents. My hands trembled slightly, but this tremor was different. It was no longer fear. It was anticipation. The electric thrill of a long overdue reckoning. Misha's eyes darted between us and the authorities, her confidence crumbling. My son's face was pale, the guilt of years finally catching up. For the first time, I saw the balance shift. I was no longer a victim. I was a force to be reckoned with. Every insult, every stolen rupee, every lie, they would all be accounted for. Even then, the night wasn't over. Noor whispered to me quietly, laying out the next steps: court dates, legal filings, witness statements. She planned meticulously, anticipating every excuse, every denial, every attempt at manipulation. And as we prepared to leave, I caught a glimpse of Misha in the hallway, standing frozen, realizing for the first time that her power was gone. The words she had once used to belittle me, to assert dominance, now fell flat, meaningless against the tide of truth. My son lingered, indecision and shame battling visibly across his face. He was trapped between allegiance and morality, between fear and conscience. That night, as I finally sat alone for a moment, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Years of suppression, humiliation, and betrayal had culminated in this confrontation. And though I knew the fight wasn't over, I felt something I hadn't in decades. Hope. Hope that my life, my autonomy, my dignity could be reclaimed. Hope that the lies and manipulation could be exposed. Hope that justice, slow, methodical, inevitable, was within reach. And I knew, deep in my bones, that this confrontation was only the beginning, because the law would now speak where words had failed, and the courtroom would be the stage where all hidden truths would finally come to light. And when the judge called my name, the entire courtroom went silent. I remember walking into that courtroom, the air thick with anticipation, tension, and silent judgment. Every step felt heavier than the last. Beside me, Noor held my hand, her grip firm, steadying me against the tremor of fear that refused to leave. I could feel my own heart pounding like a drum in my chest, hands clammy against my skirt. Across the room, Misha entered with an almost theatrical confidence, dressed to impress as if she were attending a gala, rather than facing the consequences of years of manipulation. She smiled politely at the judge, oblivious or perhaps in denial of the storm about to hit her. My son followed, eyes downcast, shuffling like a child caught in the crossfire of a secret too heavy to bear. I couldn't read his expression fully, but I knew guilt was etched in every line of his face. The judge called the court to order, his gavel striking down like a warning. We handed over the evidence, my blood, sweat, and stolen dignity laid bare in black and white. The forged power of attorney, the unauthorized withdrawals, the elder care admission form signed in my name, the receipts for luxurious vacations and spa days, all proof that my life and my money had been hijacked under the guise of care. The courtroom fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. Then Noor pressed play on the audio recording she had captured during our confrontation. Misha's voice filled the room, calm, chilling, and proud. "I'm just managing what's mine now," she thanked me later. The words cut through me like a knife. Every laugh, every boast, every manipulation I had endured for years now boomed in public, exposing her cunning for all to hear. Gasps echoed from the spectators, whispers weaving through the room like fire through dry grass. My son's head shot up as tears welled in his eyes. For months he had hidden behind excuses, cowardice, and fear of his wife. But hearing the recording, seeing the undeniable proof, something in him broke. "It's true," he choked out, voice cracking. "Misha, she forced me. I didn't know what to do. She made me sign the forms, control the bank, threaten divorce if I didn't comply. I'm sorry, Amy." Relief, fury, and heartbreak surged through me all at once. I wanted to scream, to hug him, to shake him. Every emotion collided in a storm inside my chest. I realized then that betrayal cuts both ways, one from intent, one from silence. And yet here, at last, the truth had surfaced. The judge listened intently, examining each document, replaying snippets of the recording. His gavel slammed once more, echoing like a verdict before the words were even spoken. "The power of attorney is void," he declared, voice firm, unwavering. "A full audit of the finances will be conducted immediately. Temporary control over the funds will be granted to the plaintiff's representative." That representative was Noor. My breath caught in my throat as a wave of validation and justice washed over me. Years of manipulation, humiliation, and firewall reduced to tangible accountability. But just as I felt the first stirrings of relief, chaos erupted. Misha lunged forward, her eyes wide, face twisted in fury and desperation. "You ruined my life," she screamed, hands reaching toward me. The courtroom erupted in gasps, people leaning back in their seats, startled. Security moved quickly, restraining her before she could reach me. Her lips moved, shouting accusations, threats, and bitterness, but no one could hear her through the mounting tension. The judge's gavel came down again, sharp and commanding. "You are facing charges for fraud and elder abuse. Remain calm and seated." Misha's defiance dissolved into shocked silence, the illusion of control she had clung to for years evaporating before our eyes. My son slumped, defeated, the weight of truth pressing him down. In that moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. I sat back, hands finally unclenching, feeling a rare and unfamiliar calm. The lies, the theft, the manipulation, all had been stripped bare under the unwavering gaze of justice. Noor squeezed my hand, whispering, "It's over, Amy, it's finally over." And in that silence, with Misha restrained, my son trembling, and the courtroom witnessing the full extent of the deception, I felt an almost physical release. The years of fear, shame, and powerlessness receded, replaced by a sense of reclamation and catharsis. I was no longer a victim of my own family. I was a survivor, my autonomy restored, my dignity unshaken. Even then, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs, reporters taking notes, neighbors and strangers alike witnessing the collapse of a house built on lies. The legal orders, the judge's statements, the temporary control over my finances, it all felt surreal. But freedom, I realized, is rarely quiet or painless. It comes with scrutiny, with confrontation, with the aftermath of truths too long buried. My mind raced with both relief and apprehension. What would happen next? How would we rebuild trust where betrayal had festered? How would my family navigate the chasm between justice and forgiveness? Yet for the first time in decades, I dared to breathe, to hope, to imagine a life beyond fear. And as I left the courtroom that day, Noor at my side, Misha escorted under guard, my heart was heavy but resolute. The fight had been public, the shame shared, the judgment delivered. Yet within that crucible of exposure, I felt a new strength awakening, a power I hadn't known I possessed. I had reclaimed what was mine, stood up to the people I loved, and survived the most intimate of betrayals. And though the echo of Misha's screams and the flash of my son's guilt would linger, one truth was undeniable. Justice had been served, and in that courtroom, I had taken my life back. But freedom comes with a cost. I never thought I would feel this light again. After the courtroom verdict, Noor insisted I move in with her temporarily. The first night, she cooked my favorite meal, simple, hearty, and full of love. The first real dinner I had eaten in months. As I took my first bite, warmth spread through me, not just from the food, but from the realization that I was safe, that someone cared enough to nurture me without strings, without control. I could finally breathe without that gnawing tension in my chest, without the constant fear that the next day might bring betrayal or humiliation. For the first time in what felt like decades, I was not a prisoner in my own home. Slowly, day by day, I began to rebuild myself. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected, women who reminded me of who I was before manipulation and shame had eaten away at my confidence. I joined a women's support group, and it was healing to hear stories that mirrored my own tales of betrayal, of stolen dignity, of survival. I even started teaching sewing classes to younger mothers, passing on skills my own hands had honed through years of sacrifice. Each stitch felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity, a declaration that my life was mine to shape. My health, which had withered under stress and fear, began to improve. Sleep returned, appetite returned, laughter, even hesitant at first, then stronger, more genuine, began to punctuate my days. One afternoon, my son came to visit. I saw the guilt on his face before he even spoke. He sat across from me, tears welling in his eyes, voice trembling. "Amy, I'm so sorry. I was afraid. I let her manipulate me. I should have protected you." I felt my heart ache, but I didn't respond immediately. Forgiveness was not something I could give on command. Healing takes time, and some wounds leave permanent marks. I simply nodded, allowing the silence to speak louder than words. "What would you do if you were in my place? Could you forgive someone who betrayed you so deeply, even if they were your child?" That question lingered in the room like the echo of a bell. Meanwhile, Misha's consequences were slowly unfolding. The financial investigation continued, unearthing the depth of her schemes, the careful way she had siphoned my pension into luxury and deception. I heard she had moved back in with her parents, avoiding court, dodging phone calls, the weight of accountability finally pressing down on her. Eventually, charges were filed for forgery and financial exploitation. There was no dramatic scene, no cinematic confession, just the quiet inevitability of justice catching up with lies. It was strange, almost anticlimactic, but somehow satisfying. Power does not always announce itself with shouts. Sometimes it comes in silence, in the slow turn of truth. Unspool. In the mornings, I would sit by the window with a cup of chai, the steam curling in the soft sunlight, and feel a calm I hadn't known in years. The city moved on, outside, unaware of the battles I had fought, but inside, I was reclaiming my world, one quiet moment at a time. I watched the neighbors pass, heard the distant chatter of children playing, and realized that for the first time in years, I was no longer scared. My home, my life, my choices, they were all mine again. My dignity, long hidden under layers of humiliation, was returned. I began making plans, not extravagant ones, but meaningful ones. I reconnected with friends I had avoided, visited the market, traveled to small towns nearby, and relished the simple pleasures I had been denied for so long. Each step was a declaration of freedom, each laugh a small rebellion against the years of control and fear. I taught sewing to younger mothers, not just as a skill, but as a lesson in self-reliance and independence. Watching them succeed, hearing their gratitude, I felt my own self-worth rebuilding. Piece by piece. My son continued to visit, each time a little braver, a little more open. Some days, forgiveness seemed possible. Other days, the memory of betrayal lingered too sharply. And yet, I saw growth in him, a tentative acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. And I allowed myself to hope, not blind hope, but cautious, measured hope, that one day, he might truly understand the consequences of silence and fear. That's for me. The quiet moments became sacred. The sun spilling through the windows, the sound of birds in the morning, the smell of fresh bread or chai, reminders that life could be gentle, even after storm. I understood, finally, that freedom is not just the absence of manipulation. It is the presence of choice, the reclaiming of agency, and the return of dignity long stolen. And in that stillness, as I sipped my tea, I realized something I had forgotten. I could feel. I am no longer a victim. I am myself again. I am strong. I am alive. The fear, the shame, the hunger for recognition and respect, they had all been replaced with quiet, hard-earned empowerment, and that's when I learned the truth. Freedom is the greatest inheritance.